several years ago, and again, I sense these values. I think it was, within about 2 minutes, I recognized Pete and Luann and the good-heartedness, the people-smartedness. I know that's not a word. And, but what I also learned is that although Pete graduated a few years ago, he shares some things with all of you. And that is, he was working a lot to support himself while he was going to school. As a matter of fact, he had a wife and 2 young children who are with us today, who were he was supporting while he was going to school. And so I think he was commuting from Rockford at one point, and that got to be too much, and he was working at Wurlitzer here. And he did this all to be part of the NIU Husky Pack. And so he went on to have a long and rewarding career at American Family Insurance, and obviously raised a wonderful family. I joked, Pete said, "Why, can I bring some family to the banquet?" And I said, "Hey, Angie, have you seen his Christmas cards? We'll have to move to a new venue." But I'm thrilled that you're here to share in this award. I mean, Pete has been a great support of the department and supports our students in a lot of ways. He comes to Barcena Hall often to participate in classes. He has been part of the ethics competition. And as a matter of fact, he was, I think, our first named scholarship. And so I say you set a good role model because we have a lot of named scholarships to award tonight. And so I'm thrilled to award the 2014 Distinguished Alumnus Award to Peter Walton.
My dinner tickets. We're okay. We can stay for dinner. Well, thank you, Sarah, very, very much. There we go. Complicated here. Well, that's it. I'm done. I just wanted to see if I could edit all this stuff out. Graduated in 1968. You realize that I'm up a little late. Thank you very much for the award. I truly appreciate it, and I'm humbled by it. And thank you, Sarah, very much. I do have my family here tonight. I'm extremely excited about that because they're here to watch their old dad get an award. My wife, excuse me, my wife Luann, my partner and my friend, and we've been married over 50 years. My wife Luann. Yay. Our oldest child, Wendy Gale, she lives in Freeport and works in Rockford, and she is an associate clinical project manager at packaging coordinators in Rockford, and she has 4 children and 2 grandchildren. Wendy? And our second is Tracy Paulson. She lives in Naperville, and she's an owner of Creating Your Style company, which markets several products, including Mama Cuisine, an online chef, and Tracy has 2 boys. Tracy. You're going to have to excuse me tonight. I developed a little sniffle, and I positioned my handkerchief in my pocket so I won't have a big problem. And our third child, Peter B. Walton II, an American Family Insurance agent in Mount Horeb, Wisconsin. our son Peter. And he has 3 girls. I retired from American Family Insurance after 33 years. My last position was a regional sales vice president. As Sarah mentioned, I graduated from Northern in 1968 after attending several colleges over a 10-year period. When I started with NIU, I was somewhere in my junior year, and we lived in Rockford. And so I drove down to DeKalb 2 nights a week and went to evening classes. I mention this because I know all of you in this room have made sacrifices to get your education, and I just want you to know it's worth it. Well, after a couple of years of that driving, we decided to move to DeKalb, and we rented a house on South 7th Street, a little house, and I went to work at the Wurlitzer Piano Company, which was one of the big employers in DeKalb back then, one of the world's largest producers of pianos. And it was a good thing that we did move to DeKalb, because along the way, NIU decided I had to take 4 courses of PE and in order to graduate. And so I was taking evening classes in PE over my lunch hour. And I owe a debt of gratitude to Dr. Brigham, who was the athletic director at the time, because he felt sorry for me, and he was able to arrange classes that I could go to without conflicting with work and my evening classes. Well, I finally graduated, and it was a sunny June day in DeKalb, and graduation was in the morning, and we planned a party that afternoon in the backyard of our house, because we'd been at this for 10 years, and we had a lot of friends and relatives that wondered if it was ever going to end. And so we did that. We had this party planned. Now, you guys can't get the benefit of this anymore, but back then you could write checks, and the checks wouldn't clear the bank for 4 or 5 days. And so we wrote checks for the barrel of beer and the other things that we had in the backyard. And fortunately, by 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we received enough cash gifts that we could. So that was taken care of. After graduation, for the next 6 months, we moved from DeKalb to New Orleans, and I worked at Weyerhaeuser Corrugated Box Company. I mention this because, excuse me, my point in mentioning this is that you need to, in your careers, look ahead and be realistic about what you see in the future. One afternoon, I was sitting in that box plant looking at corrugated box books, and if you think that's exciting, you'll know why I didn't stay there. But I realized, I got to thinking about every job I could possibly achieve with Weyerhaeuser over the next 25 years, and realized I really didn't want any of them. And so I quit, and we moved back to Rockford with the 2 girls, and I started my career with American Family Insurance as an agent in Rockford. In my some 50 years in business, I've had management positions of one degree or another, and I have a few points that I feel are important, and I want to share them with you. And you see, I'm not obsolete. I may not be up technologically with all that's going on, but in management, some parts never wear out. So what I'm going to share with you are things that you're going to, they're just as important in your career 10 years from now, next year, as they were for me for the last 50 years. That's why I want to share these with you. The first one is your value. That's really your worth. And it's one of the most important commodities that you can give to an organization or a corporation. And if you have value, they're going to want you. So make sure that you continually add to your value. I believe the opportunities are great today. In fact, I really think they're better than they were back when I started a number of years ago. And if you stop to think about it, look around and see what organization or group exists that doesn't need a leader or a manager? And that's the field that you're in. Every day dedicate your total effort to what you're doing, whether you like it or not. And I want to mention ethics and ethical behavior. We're fortunate here in the business school that there is an emphasis on ethics, and it can be part of your curriculum. And I don't know whether you have this card with you, but make sure that you get this card and you keep it in your career toolbox, because you're going to need this for the rest of your career. You're going to be confronted with ethical situations every day, some more serious than others. And I fortunately was never confronted in all my years in business with being in a situation where if I behaved ethically, I would lose my job. I hope that never happens to you, but you may be confronted with that someday, because that does happen. But keep the card handy so you can deal with these situations as they come up. And don't ever compromise your integrity, because that's part of your value. Don't let people take that away from you. You own that. Leadership and management are hard to separate as concepts. We are all leaders in some sense. And it's of course easy to lead when the situation is easy, and it's difficult to lead when it's difficult. There's a one word that defines the management or leadership trait, and that would be courage. Have courage to stand up for others. Have courage to stand up for yourself. Have courage to have passion and act on it. And courage takes place every day in your lives, at home, at work, and at play. Now there's a true example, a good example of leadership and management going on at Northern right now. We have a new president in Northern, and he's trying to take this huge lumbering ship and turn it in a different direction. He has established 3 pillars: ethically inspired leadership, there's ethics again, thriving communities, and financial sustainability. He also has a motto called keeping the main thing the main thing. Now I mention this to you because this is one of the toughest parts of management and leadership, is to keep the main thing the main thing. Whether you realize it or not, you lead by example. And too often in my career I've seen the person that's the head of the organization have this main thing, and then suddenly they're off on another main thing, and then pretty soon the main thing disappears. And in fact, I've been involved in the Bold Future workshops, and I took the liberty of sending a letter to President Baker to the effect of my experience in watching leaders over the years, because I knew how strong he was about keeping the main thing, and I told him about my experiences watching leaders suddenly move on to something else, and expecting those that follow them that they would keep the main thing, but that doesn't happen. So keep that in mind. Some other points from my experience: be cautious about the power you have, because it can tend to get you. And in management, you're going to have power. And this I learned a long time ago. When you take over a situation or a group or a department, tell your staff at the very beginning that you don't want any surprises. No surprises. But in order to have that work, you've got to have them be open with you. And in order to have that work, you've got to have an environment that they will be open with you. Pay attention to the very important but not so exciting stuff. And that's usually the infrastructure. You can watch the politicians. They don't really deal with the important stuff. They deal with the stuff that gets votes and is classy and it's fun. some of the really important things aren't fun. So you've got to pay attention to those. Do the must-dos. You've probably heard this before. Then the could-dos, and then the rest of the do's. I have a couple of books that I want to mention to you. One of them, I gotta do this again. Excuse me. Yes. I'm not crying.
Yeah.
I'm not Bubba Watson, I'm not crying. Is the greatest management principle in the world, GMP. This book, it's still online, you can get it online. What this book does is it deals with a concept, the things that get rewarded get done, and it develops that thought through the entire book, and you'll realize how it's woven into your everyday life. There is one chapter in there that I've made copies of, and I've left it with Mary, and she has it, and she said she'd make you a copy if you want it. It's a chapter called Action Plan Number 3, Managing Your Boss with GMP. And Peter Drucker wrote the introduction to this, and he said, you don't have to like and admire your boss, nor do you have to hate him. You do have to manage him, however, so that he becomes your resource for achievement, accomplishment, and personal success as well. I can tell you from experience, I've had to use this at least 3 times in my career. You usually get involved with something like this when you have a boss or a supervisor that you don't like or is inadequate. And you know what the temptation is going to be, and that's why I'm not going to tell you what it is because it mentions it in the chapter, but you can deal with that. And so I would encourage you to please stop by and get a copy of that. The other book is a book called The 1 Minute Manager. It's been around for years. It was the first of the series of 1-minute books. It's a little thin, skinny book that's kind of a story, but it has 2 concepts in it. And one is reprimands, which is the tough part of management, and the other is compliments, which is the easy part of management. And too often in life and in business, we mix the 2 together, and the book explains how you really don't want to do that. And it helps you to learn how to separate those. So I would advise you to get that if you can. And lastly, I want to share with you one of the great marketing events, I guess you could say, or pieces that my wife and I have run into in the last number of years. When I graduated from Northern, I really never reconnected with Northern again. And then when I retired, we were up in Minnesota and we decided to move back by the kids. And so we moved to Huntley and to be near the kids, and it turned out we were near the university. Well, over the years, we'd get those solicitation phone calls. Somehow they got my name. So we'd give them some money. I mean, token money. Well, when we moved and got closer, we thought, well, we'll kind of reconnect by giving more money. So we gave a little bit more money. And we felt that was pretty generous of us. Well, one day we get a letter, and it's from Sarah J. Marsh. And I want to read you a sentence because this changed the whole perspective on this thing. In order to recognize your commitment to NIU and the Department of Management, we would like to give you an opportunity. Nothing like opportunities, you know that? To name a scholarship to be given to one of our current students this year. Well, if you're going to have a named scholarship, Pete and Luann, you can't be given what you're given. You got to do a better job. So we did. And the other thing is, you can't just do it once, Pete and Luann. You got to keep that baby going. And so we have, and I'm really pleased that we've got the individual tonight that's going to receive our award this year. So, in closing, if you want an opportunity to have a scholarship named after you, you know how to do that. But seriously, don't forget NIU as in your surely successful careers that are in your future. And I'll tell you this, giving back feels good. So I wish you all the very best in your future. I'm looking at success all over the room, and I wish you the very best, and thank you all.
Stand up. Yay! Ja, Grace, så kan du.